everybody. Welcome. Oh no. Something's gone wrong with LinkedIn. Tells me I don't have permission. Pretty sure I do. Hang on a second, everybody. I'm just going to have to tell LinkedIn. Yeah. Oh no. Okay. Oh, drama. There's always drama, isn't there? Hang on, I need to tell the LinkedIn people that something's gone wrong. Always drama. Sorry, everybody on YouTube. Let me just tell our LinkedIn friends. There we go. Right. Well, that was interesting. Oh, it's not just me then. Oh, thank you for letting me know that. I have this whole SOP written down to make sure I don't make any mistakes when setting these things up. And that was disappointing, but that's good to know that it's not just me. Phew. Right. Well, let's see if our friends from LinkedIn make it over to YouTube. I can see Lee Monk, you've got it, but no one else has. So anyway, whatever. Let's just get on with things today. Okay, so I will do my usual hello to everybody. I think it's going to be a bijou group today. I'm just looking at some of the data coming through. So hey ho, we'll just do whatever we need to do. So Lo Monk, hello. It's lovely to see you again, as always. It's always lovely to see you. We have, Mud Assad Trainer. I'm sorry if I've put the bits in the wrong places, but hello, welcome. Where have you come from? I don't recognize your username, so I think you might be new to the channel. And we have Beneath, hello, welcome. Okay, there's a few more people on, I know. So just say hi, everybody. I would love to know where you are all from. It always takes a little bit of time for people to show up. And obviously, if we have LinkedIn issues, that's going to be more of a delay. So whilst we wait, say hi, please. I'd love to know. From Mumbai. Excellent. Awesome. I am. Am I well? Well, I just had a screaming argument with my daughter over the homework that she's supposed to be doing in preparation for school. So I'm feeling a little wound up. But other than that, hey, that happens every day, right? So that's normal. So other than that, I'm super cool. I'm very well. Thank you for asking. Okay, let's say hello to a few more people. JW, good morning. Where you are, you're right. It's not good morning here where I am. It is now 2:30 in the afternoon, and I'm feeling the need for some afternoon tea. So I'm going to look forward to that when we are done. Who else do we have here? We have Carl Tinson. Welcome, Carl. And you're from Canada. I've always wanted to go to Canada. I was going to say, is it nice? But I know Canada's nice, but I think it's cold, and I'm not good with the cold, despite living in the UK. Okay, and we have Deeprak from Germany. Guten Tag in Germany, because I know you are 1 hour ahead of me. Who else we got? Beneath, you're from the UK. Yay, up the Brits. Okay. Low Monk, yep, I'll pick up that question in a second. Carl from Florida. Oh, sunny Florida. I so wish I was there. I was planning on coming this year to go to Disney, but that didn't happen. And then I was planning on going next year, but I don't think that's going to happen either. So Carl, I might come and see you in Florida in 2023, if I'm lucky. All right then. So thank you everybody for joining. Why don't we kick off? So I usually run this for about an hour, but it depends on how many questions there are and how many people rock on. And if LinkedIn is causing us problems, we might have a few less than we would usually. So I am Gigi, and I am the Amazon interview whiz. Lomonk, I'm sorry, you must be sick of hearing this. You could probably do this portion of it for me. I was an Amazonian for 5 years, and since leaving Amazon, I set up my own Amazon interview preparation academy. I was a bar raiser and an Amazon interviewer at Amazon. You guys know that if you've watched my YouTube channel. And effectively, I set this up because I could really tell when people had interview coaching and done good prep when I was interviewing and bar raising. I went to find out, because I was curious, how much that costs. And whoa, one-to-one interview coaching is expensive. And I thought that I could probably make that quality of interview preparation available to far more people by creating my YouTube channel, which you guys obviously have seen, and also my Amazon interview preparation academy, where it's basically a digital course that provides everything I would provide to you one-to-one as a coach, but digitally, so way cheaper. And if you stay till the end, I will be giving you an incredible freebie that's a bit of a taster of my Amazon Interview Whiz Academy. Okay, what else do I need to tell you? The way this is going to work is it's as simple as you ask questions in the chat. I'll try and pick ones that I think are as useful for as many people as possible and answer them. I'm sorry, I cannot answer specific kind of role questions. So what leadership principles will I get for a financial analyst role? Or what can I expect in my technical part of my SDE interview? Those I cannot give you. I'm absolutely, I promise you, an expert in the Amazon leadership principles. I'm absolutely an expert in Amazon interview strategy and process, but there are 300 job families, if not more, in Amazon, and huge amounts of variety in the deep, deep detail. And I cannot be, no one person can be an expert in all of that. But the other areas I can definitely cover. Please don't ask me for general tips. It's all on my YouTube channel. If there's anything missing from my YouTube channel, do feel free to comment that you've looked and you can't find this particular concept, and then I can add it to my roadmap. I'm always looking for new content ideas for the YouTube channel. So either comment here or put it on YouTube and I'll pick it up. Okay, so Steve Hodgson, you're back. Buongiorno. How are you? It's lovely to see you. Sorry, everybody. I love it when people I recognize pop back up again. Where was I? Right. The other thing to say is, if you would like to say thank you for all of my efforts and my content, there is now a thank you button in the YouTube kind of details page. Or if you want to do it live, I've got super chat and super stickers enabled. Entirely up to you. All right. So why don't we go to the top and I will pick the first question. And then as people arrive, I will just say hi and, we'll play it that way. So why don't we start? So Lomonk, you've got the first question. Have I already heard of any candidate being asked about the new leadership principles? Because it's plural. No. I think is the simple answer to that. No candidate has yet told me that they are being asked the new leadership principles. I don't suspect, and look, this is purely speculation on my part and speculation of the part of all of the other Amazonians and bar raisers that I've been talking to since they announced these on the 1st of July. Unless you're going for a role, particularly in maybe a sustainability space, which is actually really, really big in Amazon and growing, which is great. The role about success and scale brings broad responsibility, or bring broad responsibility. I always pluralize that by accident, bring broad responsibility. I wouldn't imagine a huge amount of candidates are going to get that question because yes, it is important overall in Amazon's footprint. But if you go microcosmically down to hiring for an individual role, unless you're in a role where you have a direct kind of carbon footprint, vendor management, maybe specific roles in logistics, it's not going to be a key factor of success in your job. And when you're hiring someone, you need to focus on the leadership principles that are going to be the key factors of success in that role. And there is there's always been a material tension about which leadership principles you actually interview for. At best, you can probably fit 10 into a loop, and there's already 14 leadership principles, although there there were. Now there's 16. Just because there's more leadership principles, it doesn't mean there's more opportunity to ask leadership principles. So you're still really only going to have 10 to choose from. So you're going to have to pick the ones that microcosmically are going to direct you to who the most successful candidate will be for that particular role. So for the broad responsibility one, I would hypothesize that not a lot of people beyond those sustainability roles or those kind of buyers, people who have really do have a one step away from carbon footprint impact, are going to be interviewed. The other one, in terms of strive to be Earth's best employer, they're really long as well. It's not like I can just go earn trust, dive deep. So many words involved in them. No, haven't seen anybody yet been interviewed on those. I think a lot of that will find its way bubbling up out of earn trust and hire and develop the best. When you see the questions that are relating to that particular leadership principle, there does appear to be quite a lot of crossover between earn trust and hire and develop the best. So I would suspect a lot of hiring managers and interviewers are going to be able to identify the behaviors of strive to be Earth's best employer from asking questions on earn trust and hire and develop. Now, clearly, I am hypothesizing that at this point in time, there's not a huge data set to pull from because it's only been a month and a bit, really. But as yet, no, I'm not seeing those really heavily interviewed for. Thanks for the question, Low Monk. I'm just going to check back on LinkedIn and see if anybody's... No one's freaking out. That's fine. Apart from my dog outside the door, you might be able to hear her whining. Okay, so moving on. Thanks for the question, Low Monk. Let's move on. Hey, we've got Paul A from DC. Welcome, Paul A from DC. Thank you for joining us today. Abdul, hello, Abdul. Thank you for joining. Okay, so what's this one? Okay. Sorry, just looking for a question that I think is going to be useful for everyone. Okay. So there's another one from Low Monk. Good question, Low Monk. Sorry, yours was the one before that, but I think this is useful for everybody. So does the recruiting process for one particular position work as a first in, first out, I think you mean by FIFO, list regarding the order of a candidate applying? So basically, the sooner you apply, the better. Okay. So yes and no. Purely from kind of a bit of a technical kind of process point of view. So it's not intended to be that the first person applies is intended to be the first person to get the job. And there's some kind of deviation between that. So let me break it down into two parts. The Amazon interview process is a first past the post process. So it's a conveyor belt. CV resume will be reviewed and then passed on to maybe first round interview. Whilst first round interview is happening for that individual person, other people will continue to apply. And, it's like a conveyor belt where people just go along in their own timeline until the first person gets to the end of the conveyor belt, who they consider to be bar raising. They offer them a job and then the job is closed and no longer available. So in theory, the earlier you are in the application process, the further ahead you'll be of everybody else behind you in the conveyor belt. And therefore, if you are proven to be bar raising, you'll get the job behind those in the conveyor belt. Now, the other thing that happens in the background is when your resume is picked up, it's passed over into the system, which is called Hire. And a hiring manager reads through those resumes. Now, some hiring managers will read the resumes every day so that they don't end up with a big backlog. They would every day religiously go in, open up Hire, read the resumes, take a decision as to whether they want to call that person for interview or not. Other hiring managers might wait 2 or 3 weeks for all of the resumes to build up, then set aside half a day to work their way through all of the resumes. Scenario number one, obviously, the earlier you apply, the quicker you're going to get onto the cycle and potentially get ahead of the rest. In the second scenario, somebody could apply on day one and someone could apply on day 19. And because the hiring manager has chosen to stack revenues, the person on day one will be no further ahead than the person on day 19. So, because of all of that variability, I would still suggest to candidates that as soon as you see a role that you are interested in, get your resume up to scratch as quickly as you can with quality and submit it. Then, if you are called for interview, you're going to have to make a decision as to how quickly you want to go to interview, knowing it's this conveyor belt and there might be other people ahead of you in the conveyor belt, and being confident that you've done sufficient preparation to get you through round one. Important thing to note about round one in Amazon is in a lot of companies, round one is just a very informal chit chat, informal conversation. They get a feel for you and then decide whether they want to move you forward. Now, that does happen sometimes in Amazon interviews, but more broadly, an Amazon interview round one looks exactly the same as Amazon interview in final round, and it's deep and it's rigorous. So you do have to put in a lot of prep just to make it through round one. And therefore, you're going to have to weigh up that balancing act as to how quickly you want to book in a date because of this first past the post process versus how much time do you need to make sure that you are well prepared. So the sooner you apply, the better. Very, very broadly, yes, but with all of those kind of nuances in it that I just described. Thanks for the question, Low Monk, as always. Yeah. Right. It's a really, really good question, Sophie, and so pertinent. So how do you make sure that you sound natural during the interview with all of this preparation beforehand? So a lot of it is going to depend on your personal delivery skills. You want to make sure that you don't teach yourself a script. So lots of people come in and I know they're literally reading from, at least reading in their head from a script. And that's what can make it seem very, very unnatural. My best tip is to have key points in your star bulleted down. And then when you are practicing, practice to yourself first, expressing those bullet points in your star. And because you're not kind of reading off a script for yourself, you'll find that you slightly change the way you articulate those bullets in your star, actually star E with an I at the end. If you don't know what I'm talking about there, check out my YouTube video about the hidden Amazon leadership principle. So I'd start with the kind of following a bullet process rather than creating a script. Even if you write a script first to get you focused on the data that you want to make sure you put in there, delete out everything you don't, then translate that into bullet points. That might be a good way of working it backwards. The second tip I'll give you is mock interviews. Because the more practice you have of people interrupting you, asking you different types of questions, the less your brain will become locked in to an expected pattern. All human brains search for patterns. It's a way of reducing the amount of calories that we burn in our mental processing, blah, 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 so that we can run from big, scary lines, etc. So the human brain is always looking for patterns. And the risk is if you don't do mock interviews and you're just drilling yourself saying the stuff over and over and over again, your brain just puts it into kind of the B part of your brain where the subconscious just takes over and you're just repeating words. You're not really thinking about what you're saying. So then if someone comes along and breaks your concentration and asks you a different question, the B part of your brain is going to freeze because it's not built to actively cognitively process. You want to keep those kind of concepts in the A part of your brain. So that's my other big tip is do lots of mock interviews. Get people to keep interrupting you, asking you different questions. It doesn't matter if they know nothing about the Amazon interview process or even if they know nothing about interviewing, but just forcing your brain to always be actively thinking about what you're saying is a second good tip I have for natural. The third tip I have is a couple of tricks in terms of how you speak. Pause. Pause as if you're thinking, even if you're not thinking and you know exactly the next sentence that you're going to articulate. Pause as if you're thinking, or throw in the odd, right, yes, because it looks like you are actively thinking in the moment. It's very human, even though actually you've got kind of the very clear idea in your head about what you're going to say next. So those are my 3 big tips. I hope they're helpful, Sophie. Okay. Hello, quickly, Coulson. How do I pronounce that? I'm not even going to try that because I know I will offend you. And that's the last thing I want to do. So I don't provide one-to-one interview coaching, but I can provide you a referral to someone who I think is really, really good and can help you out. So if you want to ping me on LinkedIn. So I'm Gigi, the Amazon Interview Whiz on LinkedIn, and I can give you their direct contact referral. Because you're coming from me, they will do everything that they can to fit you in the next couple of days, because he always prioritizes my referrals. So ping me on LinkedIn ASAP, and I will give you some contact details. He's fabulous. Okay. Jasir. Hello, Jasir. Welcome back. Okay. I get this question a few times a month, I think. So I'm going to cover it off, but it's definitely been covered before. So would it be appropriate to share your letter of recommendations with the interviewer, or can you send them beforehand to the recruiter before your loop? So they're not really interested in your letters of recommendations. I'm sorry to be brutally honest. In Amazon, the interviewer is just going to make up their own mind. The process is so rigorous that they will gather the information that is there to gather. They'll gather it themselves, and they'll gather it in the Amazonian way. Whether somebody else before them has thought you were great or not, they don't really care, in brutal honesty. They want to gather the information themselves and make the decision themselves. Because even if someone before thought you were fantastic, they weren't an Amazonian. And if they weren't an Amazonian, then they don't think you're fantastic for the reasons that Amazon would want to think you're fantastic. So you can, but I doubt very much they would be passed on. And even if they were passed on, I'd be highly skeptical that they would be read. And even if they were read, it still wouldn't make any difference to the process and the decisions that they make about you. So obviously you're going to want referees. Yes, referees. At the end of the process, if you are offered a role, then they will want to speak to people who have worked with you before, just to sanity check that their experience of you chimes with the reality of other people's experience with you in the past. But that's really the only role that references make in an Amazon interview process. It's a very light touch, kind of just rubber stamping process. It really doesn't influence any of the decision making in the process itself. So personally, I don't think it's worthwhile. Thank you for the question. Let's see what else we've got. Hey, Vicky. Thanks for joining, Vicky. So you've had 3 interviews for 3 different jobs, and the recruiter and the interviewers think that you're Amazonian, but not quite right for the jobs they had. We've got another interview. Is this unusual? So it's definitely not unusual for people to go through multiple processes. Tick on that one. Is it unusual to be told 3 times that you are bar raising as an Amazonian, but not the right fit for the role? I mean, I've got no solid data on that to know whether that is hugely unusual. Usually when people say that they've kind of gone back to the role once or twice, they don't tell me that every single time they've been told that they're a bar raiser as an Amazonian but not fit for the role. So I'm going to say yes, I think it's probably a bit unusual. I think one of the things that you want to think about, Vicky, is how do those roles compare to each other? If you sat down and looked at all of those 3 different roles that you've applied for where you weren't quite right for those roles, but somehow you were considered to be a good fit for Amazon, what's common about those roles between them that might give you an indicator of where perhaps you aren't as strong as you might need to be in a particular leadership principle for a particular type of role? Because if you can find those common themes across those 3 different roles that you've had before, that might give you some indicators as to where you are probably not going to want to focus your job search moving forward versus where you potentially should focus your job search moving forward. So I think you've got a little bit of detective work to do when you reflect on your interview experience of the past at Amazon. So to sum up, definitely not unusual to go backwards and forwards multiple times. To be told 3 times that you're a bar raising Amazonian but not quite right for that role, I'd say that's probably a bit unusual. No hard data for you on that one though, Vicky. Okay. Yeah, quickly, Sophie. Hey, Sophie. So yeah, it's really annoying. So a loop is a virtual interview panel. So loop, panel, virtual, on-site, all different words for more or less the same thing. So if you're saying you've got a 2-hour virtual interview set up for next week, if that's part of a process where you're meeting multiple different Amazonians and say, I mean, if it's got 2 hours, maybe you've got 45 minutes with a couple of people, kind of hard to tell from what you're describing here. But effectively, it's the last stage of the interview process before someone's going to decide whether they're going to give you an offer or not. So you will have had either done an online assessment and gone straight to this process step now, or you did a first round interview and went straight to this process, or you did a first round and a second round process and then went to this stage, or you did an online assessment. To any of those things, there's multiple different combinations. But Sophie, effectively, loop is the final stage. So if you're not entirely clear which of those steps you're at, just ask your recruiter, am I at the final stage? There is now so much variation in how teams use the process being anything from those online assessments, 2 rounds of kind of early stages, the actual on-site / final stage, plus another one can happen afterwards. Teams can use any combination of those. So it's just worth checking specifically with your recruiter exactly what stage of the process am I at now? Am I at the final stage? And they'll be able to provide clarity. Never, ever be embarrassed to ask questions of your recruiter. I know people are self-conscious sometimes about asking too many questions of the recruiter. I don't know if you're worried that it might make you look unprofessional or stupid in some way. Please don't think that. I promise you they're there to help. So ask the question. I hope that helps to a degree. Okay. Beneath. So your question is, are the technical or the behavior team decision makers? They're not different people, Vineth. So the people that are going to ask you the technical questions are the same people that are going to ask you the behavioral questions. The only exception might be if you're at the final stage and you're talking to a bar raiser. The bar raiser might not have the same technical skills as the team and the role that you're applying for, in which case they would focus only on behavioral. But the same people should be asking you the technical and the behavioral. And even if it's not exactly the same people, the people that ask you the technical are perfectly capable of asking you the behavioral. And the people who are asking you the behavioral are perfectly capable of asking you the technical. Neither of those two groups are the decision makers. The decision makers are the people who are in your final stage, panel, loop, etc., to Sophie's point. And together, that group will look at all of the evidence, both the technical evidence and the behavioral evidence, to make a decision as to whether to hire you or not. It isn't that one team or another, or one interviewer or another is the decision maker. The actual group of them who are part of your final stage will review the data and try to come to a decision. The final decision will be made between the hiring manager and the bar raiser. If they can't agree, ultimately the bar raiser will be the person to say whether they believe the evidence that they have seen is bar raising or not. Maven, one job ID is open per post. Yes. So there can be one job ID. Yeah. Okay. So let's work it this way around. You can have one job ID to many roles. You can have one job ID to one role. But what you can't have is multiple job IDs to a single role. So they can open what's called a pooling rec, which is one job ID, and they might be looking to fill 15 SDE1 roles, for example, but they only advertise it once with one job ID. You might also have one job ID, but all you're recruiting for is one senior finance manager. That's the way it could work. Hope that helps. Okay, so moving on then. Right, so someone's got me a multiple part question here, so I'm just jumping up and down to have a look at it. Oh, right, so that's Steve offering everybody else some advice. All right, guys, folks, read Steve's advice on sounding natural. Okay. All right, good stuff. Hello. So for an analyst, IJP, I don't know what IJP is, but how many interviews are conducted? Okay, so the first one is, I can't tell you that. To my point a few minutes ago, which was probably just after you wrote this question, there is enormous amount of deviation within the organization in terms of how many rounds and what those rounds look like between different business units and different teams. When I started at Amazon, it was incredibly uniform. Everybody did it the same way. Now there's just the most enormous amount of deviation. So I can't tell you that. Again, to my point before, just ask your recruiter. Your recruiter should have no good reason not to explain to you what process it is that you are headed into. There's no benefit to not telling a candidate that information. So check with your recruiter, Gustav. Also, how much weightage is the hiring manager's decision in the final selection? There's no weighting. It's not a mathematical process where the hiring manager gets 25% weightage of the vote, et cetera, et cetera. Ultimately, the people that really have to be convinced that you are a bar raising candidate are the hiring manager and the bar raiser. Everybody else's data is really important. Their opinions matter and are very much considered, and their data gathered in, and the bar raiser and the hiring manager will be listening very carefully to everybody's opinion. But ultimately, the hiring manager has to want to hire you, have you work in their team, and the bar raiser has to be convinced that you are actually raising the bar at that level for that job function in Amazon. So the people that really matter, as I say, hiring manager and bar raiser. The bar raiser can veto the hiring manager if they don't believe that you are really, really raising the bar for the organization overall and for that function overall. But there's no weighting applied anywhere. I hope that helps. Okay, just scrolling. Okay, so here we go. Smit, hello. Is it possible to get interview feedback after the interview, especially if you're rejected? No, Amazon does not provide feedback to candidates post-interview. Sometimes recruiters will give you some information, but as a policy, Amazon doesn't do that. So I do have quite a detailed video about this on my YouTube channel. It boils down to kind of two reasons. One is so that they don't get sued, simplifying it all up. And the second is so that interviewers feel comfortable being able to be totally honest without fear of reprisals through social media if the recruiter were to share with the candidate some feedback that they weren't overly keen on. So unfortunately, no, you're not going to get feedback as policy. You might get lucky. Some candidates do, and the recruiter might give you a little bit of insight. Okay. Oh, Sophie, that's nuts. So you got an email saying they enjoyed speaking with you and they'd like to invite you to a virtual interview. That's bonkers, Sophie. Completely bonkers. You need to speak to your recruiter. I don't know what they're doing. Best check. Ashley Green is in the house. Welcome back, Ashley Green. I haven't seen you for a while. Thanks for coming back. Oh, I'm excited to see you. Okay, what else do we have? That's a good question, Jasir. Can you redo an interview if you're extremely nervous the first interview? No, I'm sorry. There are no do-overs. You can't say I did really badly because I was nervous. Can I do it again? It's not the way interviewing works anywhere, let alone in Amazon. So I do have a video, funny enough, on my YouTube channel that talks about nerves and how to try and deal with nerves. Your interviewer will do their very, very best to try and help you relax. If it goes badly because you were really, really nervous, then you're going to have to just kind of take that on the chin and bear it in mind when it comes to the next time you apply for Amazon. But unfortunately, there's no option to tell your recruiter you were nervous and could you have a do-over. It doesn't work like that. Okay, so we have any other questions? Let me just get rid of this pop-up, which is in my way. Right. Keep coming with your questions, folks. Okay, let me just read this one from Vineeth. Okay, so let me just make sure I understand this, Vineeth. You've got another interview scheduled for another role, and the HR is the same. So you've got the same recruiter. Recruiting and HR are completely different in Amazon, just to be specific. So you've got the same recruiter hiring for another role, and you're asking me the result of the star level for the first. Okay, right. So there's no star level, but I think what you're saying to me is, does the result of the first interview process that you went through and obviously didn't land the role on affect the second one if it's negative? Okay, so they wouldn't have called you for a second interview if the results of the data and the opinion of the panel on your first round or first set of interview was that bad. Like, they wouldn't call you back because everybody has access to that data. So that's the first thing to bear in mind. You wouldn't be going back for a second try if it was that bad. Then the next question, I suppose, to pursue is, does the evidence that is gathered in the first rounds of interviews affect people's judgment when you go for a second role? Yes and no. And that's the challenge with interviewing. The fact that Amazon's process is incredibly structured and incredibly well-defined with excellent boundaries and parameters, better than any organization I've worked with or for ever in the past. But nonetheless, you've still got human beings involved in it. So for some people, they'll read your notes from your previous role application and they'll go, no, okay, fair enough. But they'll be able to come to this time round with a very, very fresh mind, completely open-minded, open perspective. Other people, they'll read that information. They'll say to themselves, right, okay, but this person's coming back again. We need to give them a completely clean sheet. But the reality is they've read something. You can't unread things. And perhaps what's happened in the past may influence some of their decision making around this time. Certainly, if some of the mistakes that you make the first time find their way creeping back into the second time, that will get picked up on. But if everything that you did, or if things that you perhaps did not do quite right the first time aren't issues the second time, then you're going to be fine, because they're not going to look at the last set of data for the last interview and say, well, although he did it really well this time, he didn't do that very well the first time round, and therefore we're going to hold that against him. No, it doesn't work like that. So just be positive, right? You would not have made it through to the second role if the notes from your first role were particularly negative. So they must have seen that you got rejected from the first role, thought actually he probably wasn't right for that role, which is why he didn't get hired. But for us, looks like a good candidate. We're going to bother investing the, I don't know what it is. I think I've worked it out before, 15 hours, I think, of Amazon interview time again in this person. It means they think you're worth it. Okay. Gustav, IJP, internal job posting. Okay. So let me just remind you. Okay. So you're an Amazonian already then, if you're looking at an internal job posting. Anyway. Okay. So what else do we have? Hey, Ashley. So a staffing agency contacted you and you declined to progress. Should you contact the recruiter and express interest again? So Ashley, if you think the role is still open, best thing to do is look for the job title on the Amazon job portal and see if that role is still open. If you know the recruiter, I think you're talking conceptually as different things: a staffing agency external and a recruiter internal. If you know the Amazon recruiter, then no reason why you shouldn't drop them a line and just say you're now in a different situation. You'd actually be really interested in the role. You probably wouldn't be surprised to discover that many Amazon roles stay open for a very long time. It can take a year, if not more, to hire at some levels in Amazon. So, hey, why not? Give it a go. They may still be hiring, or they may be looking for a similar type of role, and maybe you'll get in there. Good luck with that one, Ashley. Okay. God, I've got notifications everywhere on my computer. It's driving me crazy. Right. Okay. So Kevin and Sumit, you're both asking me questions about, do I have any final tips for final interview, or could I guide you through what you should avoid during the interview? I have loads of information on my YouTube channel. I think the best way to answer those questions is to just go through my YouTube channel. There's like 2.5 hours of tips on what you should be focusing on for the final interview. And also a whole, I think it's 5 mistakes in an Amazon interview that you are unlikely to recover from. I think that is the loop. That's the video title on the YouTube channel. So I would suggest that both of you go and check out the YouTube channel, because I could spend a very long time here going through all of that. Miss Nip. Okay, I am going to... Oh, it's not an I, it's an M. I thought that was an I. Yeah, okay. Oh, I can't pronounce that. That's too many consonants. Lacks vowels. Can't speak. Can't say that. Tips on questions for the bar raisers. Okay, so just to be clear, are you asking me for tips on questions you should be asking them? Or are you asking me for tips on questions that they're going to ask you? If you could clarify that, I will give... In fact, you know what? I'm going to answer both of those. Doesn't matter which one you meant. I'm going to answer both of them. So, tips for questions that you should ask your bar raiser. So your bar raiser is unlikely to come from the team that you are applying for. So do not ask them any questions about the team, what it's like to work in the team, what their key goals are, key objectives, big projects, blah, blah, blah. They can't tell you. And the worst thing actually is, and this happened to me all the time, is I would always start my interviews with candidates where I was the bar raiser by explaining that I do not work in this team. And therefore, if you have any questions that are specific to the team, I can't answer them for you. Please do reserve them for the hiring manager or someone from the direct team. And yet they would still ask me those questions at the end of the interview. And that left a really bad impression because it shows you're not listening. You weren't paying attention. So don't do that. If someone tells you that they are not from the team, make sure you don't ask them any questions that they can't answer because they've already told you that, and it is a bad sign of somebody at interview if you've told them something and then 20 minutes later, or it could be 40 minutes later, they ask you the question when really they know that you can't answer it. So that's the first one. What you should be asking your bar raiser are more general questions. So I'd be asking them all sorts of questions about their journey to Amazon, what they like the most about Amazon. I always like the question of what's your favorite leadership principle and why. I would also be asking them other questions about how Amazon has changed over the time that they've been there, what attracted them to Amazon, all of those questions that are really focused on trying to just understand the culture, much as I hate that word, it's very unspecific, and what it is to work in Amazon and how it feels to work in Amazon. So those are the questions I would be asking the bar raiser. The second part is what questions should you be asking? What questions will the bar raiser ask you? So this is the bit where I climb up on my soapbox. So let me just climb up on my soapbox. Right. Don't believe anybody that tells you that there are specific questions that a bar raiser will ask you, or that there are specific strategies for impressing a bar raiser, because they're lying to you. They're either, well, that's maybe unfair. They're either lying to you consciously, and usually because they want to convince you that they know something that nobody else does on a subject that obviously is a big trigger subject, and therefore sell you something and take your money away from you. Or they have been reading other people's content that fill category number one and don't realize that people in category number one are lying and that this whole concept doesn't actually exist. And then they go and, perpetuate the myth. So there are no specific questions that a bar raiser will ask you. And that's because a bar raiser is assigned random leadership principles. Everybody who goes into the loop as an interviewer or panel, Sophie, is just assigned a leadership principle, either from the recruitment coordinator or from the hiring manager. A hiring manager might decide they want a particular person to have a particular leadership principle if they know that person is particularly strong. I always got allocated dive deep. But other than that, they have no say over what leadership principle they get. And a bar raiser could get any one of the 16 leadership principles. I remembered 16. And because of that, there cannot be specific bar raiser questions. That's not true, actually. I lie. The Amazon Interview Question Bank could, if they wanted to, assign unique questions just for a bar raiser in that leadership principle, but they don't. They just don't exist. So there are no unique bar raiser questions. There are no leadership principles that have a higher probability of being assigned to a bar raiser. And there are no questions within a particular leadership principle that have a higher probability of being asked of you from a bar raiser. They go through exactly the same training when it comes to interview technique and how to interview as everybody else. They go through different training to be a bar raiser, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the actual interview skills and the interview experience, which is not related to skills and requirements of bar raisers. So that's it. Now, you can't expect anything different from a bar raiser. So just bring your A game to every single interview that you're at, and then you won't go far wrong. But you don't need to and are not able to do anything different for a bar raiser interview than you would for any of the other interviews. Don't believe anybody that tells you that you do, because what they've done is they've tapped into the anxiety that is expressed here every week. Every week, twice a week, people ask me about the bar raiser, about something unique about the bar raiser. people are tapping into that anxiety and they're trying to make money out of it. And it's disgraceful, which is why I said I get on my soapbox, because look, everyone's got to earn some money. Everyone's got to pay the bills. And if you do that with genuine value add, with information that is real and true and adds value to candidates or anybody in the world, then that's fair. That's capitalism. But if you use people's anxiety and you create mistruths in order to make money. I'm sorry, I'm really on my soapbox today. I must not have had enough caffeine. That I cannot abide. So that's why I'm sorry I got onto such a rant here, because it just makes me so angry, because I know that anxiety exists and it's fair and it's understandable. But please don't be duped by people who tell you they can magically solve that problem for you, because it's not actually a real problem. All right, I'll stop ranting. Thank you for the question. Okay, let me just pick that one off. Okay, I'll just quickly pick this question up. So you've had a application under consideration for months. Is there anything you can do to further your candidacy? Not really, I'm afraid. Unless you happen to know who the recruiter or the hiring manager is for that particular role, I'm afraid there's nothing you can do. My experience having stepped out of Amazon, when you're inside Amazon as an interviewer or a bar raiser, actually you have no experience whatsoever of that front end system. Only really the recruiters and the candidates use that front end system. And from what I've learned over the past period, even recruiters are slightly baffled by how exactly that system works. But from what I have learned, it's very patchy. The role could be closed and filled and someone already bum on seat working in a job, and your application could still look like it's under consideration, because it's not a integrated, automated process to update those statuses. It actually requires a recruiter to go in and change status of your application. And if they get busy and caught up in other higher priority things, you can very easily have statuses like under consideration for years. Ironically, I saw an Amazon recruiter post on LinkedIn the current status of her prior 5 Amazon job applications. And she's currently working in Amazon, and a whole number of them still said her application was under consideration, even though it was well over 2 years ago that she made those applications, and she's currently working at Amazon. So I'm really sorry. I'm sorry, it's not my fault. I find it painful to have to try and explain or not explain those statuses to candidates, because I think it's just like the Wild West in terms of that front end system. If you're from Recruiting Engine at Amazon and you know differently, I would love to hear from you, because people are always asking me how those statuses work, how they get updated, what they mean, when they'll change, etc., etc. So I'm sorry, that's no answer for you other than to say, unfortunately, you just need to wait to hear back. And if you don't hear back after a significant period of time, it's probably because they're not progressing your application, even if it says under consideration. Okay. Okay, Carl. So it isn't that the bar raiser is looking for the interviewee's potential to perform better than 50%. Everybody is looking for that. So I'm sure that's just a nuance, and I'm sure that's what you meant. But just to be clear, that is the standard that you are being judged against when you are interviewing at Amazon. So what metrics and data are they using? The leadership principles. So the leadership principles that are there, and you'll see what good looks like and what not good looks like from a calibration point of view. Everybody who is interviewing you works with people on a day-to-day basis who operate at that level. So part of the conversation that they'll have in your debrief will be, Carl gave us this example where he went toe-to-toe with a sales director. This was the kind of challenge he had. This was the actions that he took. This is what the outcome was. And part of the conversation they'll be saying to everybody else is, well, all these other people that are operating at Carl's level, like, would we expect them to do that? Would we expect them to go toe-to-toe with that sales director? And what you'll find is those people around the room are saying, well, some would, but do you know what? The vast majority would probably just kind of come to me or their hiring manager to try and progress that. Really, it's only the strongest candidates, like the strongest employees, my top 2 people in my team, who I would expect to go toe to toe or have gone toe to toe with the sales director before. So it isn't metric driven. It can't be metric driven. That's impossible to create. I don't know how they would ever create those metrics and measure them. It's very much about people's experience within the role and talking to each other about their different experiences. And that's where the bias, I think, is helped mitigated, because somebody else might say, well, actually, hang on, I've got 7 people all operating at Carl's level, and every single one of them, my entire team, they go toe to toe with sales directors regularly. So, maybe it doesn't happen in your team, but I'm not convinced that Carl is bar raising, because my team would all do pretty much that as standard. And that's kind of how they get to that decision. There are job standards that are clearly defined for every single job. So goes toe to toe with sales directors, influences others, writes strategic documents, solves major problems, directly deals with C-suite leaders in customers. It's all written down in terms of the job standards. So they'll be looking at that triumvirate, I suppose, of what the leadership principles say are the behaviors they're looking for, what the job standard says in terms of the skills and capabilities that they're looking for in the job, and then the data that they gather from you, Carl, in the interview, and how that stacks up in terms of the data that they gather every single day working in the company alongside other people who are operating at that level in the role. So it isn't metric, but it is data, if that makes sense. Okay, I hope that helped then, Carl. What else do we have here? Just do a time check. Oh, we got 3 minutes left. Okay, let me just check and see what new comments we've got and see if I can find new. Just that's an awesome question. I'm going to do this one. Do recruiters hire recruiters, or who hires recruiters? Recruiting hiring managers hire recruiters. Does that make sense? So, like any other organization, recruiting has different levels. You've got level 4s, level 5s, level 6, level 7, level 8s, right? So they're leadership and they're managers. So you could be a manager of a recruiting team and you'd be an L6 and you would hire for someone in your team. So you are a recruiter, but you are actually a hiring manager. Do you, as that hiring manager, act as the recruiter on that role? No, you don't double job. Somebody else will be acting as the recruiter for your role that you are hiring as a recruiting hiring manager. That's a brain baffler, that one, just there. Thank you for that. That was real exercise for my brain. Okay, so I'm going to try and squeeze in one more question. Okay. Okay, so Tony, split loops. Yes, split loops are actually not uncommon at all. So I have definitely bar raised on a split loop. And have I ever interviewed on a split loop? Maybe. So let me just explain to everybody what a split loop is. A split loop is where one candidate is applying for 2 different roles, and the teams feel that those 2 different roles are similar enough. They may not be exactly the same role, but they're similar enough that rather than force poor candidate to have to go through the entire process in parallel twice over, what they do is they push the 2 processes together. Half of the interview panel are from one team, half of the interview panel are from the other team. Obviously, you've got the bar raiser who is third party. Hopefully, both hiring managers are on the loop, sometimes not, but very, very rarely. They gather the evidence and then they do the debrief about whether the candidate is bar raising on the leadership principles. And that's the focus of the debrief. Are they bar raising on the leadership principles? Then what you do as a bar raiser is say, right now, if you get to the point where you've all agreed that the candidate isn't bar raising on the leadership principles, then you stop, because there's no point in discussing which role if they just haven't proven their bar raising. If you've established as the bar raiser that the candidate is bar raising on the leadership principles, what you'll then do is to go into a conversation about, right, what are the key leadership principles for this role and what are the key leadership principles for that role? Given this data set that we're looking at and where we're seeing the candidate as being strong, some strength, mixed, concern, whatever it is, which of these two roles is a better fit? And at that point, the fun and games begin, because either both hiring managers are going to go, well, they're perfect for our role and this is why. Actually, more often, because Amazonians are very sensible people in general for hiring, what you'll find is one hiring manager goes, well, do you know what? Based on the strengths that I can see across the board here, I actually not convinced that even though he's bar raising overall, that he's going to be right for my role. In which case you say to the other person, okay, what do you think? Hopefully what they'll say is, yes, actually, I think they're a great fit for my role. It gets a bit weird if you've decided someone's bar raising overall and both hiring managers are saying, but they're not actually right for my role. It's an edge case. I don't think I've ever had to do that on a split loop. So really, don't worry about it. Just focus on your answers to the behavioral questions. You leave it up to the interviewers and the bar raiser to do the kind of disaggregation between the two roles. What you might find is your recruiter comes back to you and says, actually, both teams want to hire you. Which role would you like? Bingo, best scenario possible. More likely than not, they'll come back to you and say, actually, we think this is a better fit for your role and for you, and this is the role we'd like to offer you. Or, of course, unfortunately, you haven't raised the bar overall. Okay, so... yes. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Quick one then. Who are bar raisers? I'm not going to cover that now. Please go check out my YouTube channel. I have a whole video that talks about the truth about bar raisers. So go check that one out and it will tell you everything that you need to know. Okay. Julio. Right. I'm going to do this last question. It's going to make us run over, but it's worth doing. And I keep saying to myself, I must make a YouTube video out of this one because it's so important and I never get around to it. So I must do that. Right. What tip could I provide to identify the specific LP in the interview question? So Julio, my tip is don't try, right? So I know you're all going to be sitting at the other end of that going, what? That makes no sense whatsoever. But I will have a go at trying to make it make sense to you. The questions that my mother's at the front door now, actually. My dog's going to start barking. Sorry, I'm just going to ignore her. The questions that your interviewer are going to ask you are pulled from the different facets of the leadership principles. If you don't know what I mean by the different facets of the leadership principles, just go and take my Customer Obsession Masterclass, which I will show you how to get for free now, and it will all make sense to you. But there's different facets for each leadership principles, and all of the questions that you could possibly be asked for those leadership principles derive from those different facets, right? So if you... Is anyone else reading this Zero person? I'm tempted to block, but it's just so hilarious. If you understand the facets of the leadership principles and create examples that relate to those facets, it won't matter what question you're asked because you will have an example that matches that question because you've pulled it from the same facets as those questions have come from. So what should happen if you've done your prep properly is any question that you get, your little Rolodex in your head, I'm that old, the little Rolodex in your head will go, oh yes, I've actually got an example that matches that question. You don't need to worry about, oh, which LP is it? And therefore, which examples did I come up with for that LP? You bypass that entire mental process. And all you really need to be thinking about is, that's the question. Right, this guy's getting blocked. Sorry. Let me just do that quickly now. I said it's a guy. I don't even know if it's a guy. There we go. Hilarious. Sorry. You skip that whole part of your mental process, and all you have to do is think about, that's the question I'm being asked. Do I have an example that matches that question? So the best thing I can say to you to do is really understand the leadership principles. Really understand the leadership principles. Create your examples based on the facets of those leadership principles. And then it will just be so screamingly obvious to you when you're asked a question, which of your examples best fits that question. Okay. That's my best tip. I promise I will do a YouTube video about it, and I will try and come up with some images and articulations of how best to do that. But I hope that helps, Julio, because I do worry that what happens is, and I'll give you this as a very specific use case, what can happen is a candidate thinks, that's a customer obsession leadership principle question. I'm just going to roll out my pre-prepared customer obsession example. And actually, they don't answer the question because they've picked up on a customer obsession facet. This is not the facet that I was asking a question on. And I can't tell you how many times candidates just have not answered the question that I've asked because they've been fixated on what leadership principle they think I'm questioning them on, and just given me their out of the box customer obsession per the example, and actually it's the wrong facet. Customer obsession has 4 different facets. Okay, so we are now at time. So sorry for those of you where I did not get to your question. I'm back again on Wednesday. So that's 5:30 p.m. British summertime. So please come along, check out my YouTube channel. So much of the questions that you'll ask me today and will ask me in the future already on my YouTube channel. So check that out. But I did say I was going to give you some things. But I said I was going to do that. Hang on. Technical issues. Alert. Right, let's get rid of that and see if this works. Banners. Here we go. Now it works. Right. So please do go along to the AmazonInterviewWizAcademy.com. There you can get my Customer Obsession Masterclass. That will teach you about the 4 different facets of customer obsession. It will tell you exactly what they're looking for when it comes to your answer. And it will also show you a mock interview of what it's going to be like to have a customer obsession interview at Amazon and how best to land your answers. I give it away for free because, of course, I want you to watch it, think it's great, and buy some more of my product. But I chose that one specifically because every single one of you will, if you make your way through all the way to the final stage, panel, interview, loop, on-site, whatever, Sophie, you will get customer obsession. So that's the one I can guarantee everyone's going to get. So that's the one that I do give away for free. So please go grab that for yourself. Super easy on Teachable to be able to use. It's yours for life, even if you don't pay for it. So you can always come back to it another time. Okay, so that's it for today. Thank you for joining. Thank you so much for the questions. Great set of questions. And take care of yourself. The world is still, in fact, I think it gets madder by the day. So please take care, and hopefully I'll see you again sometime soon. Be safe. Bye-bye.